This is a podcast from the Environmental Change and Security Program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars.
I'm Geoff Dabelko, Director of the Environmental Change and Security Program here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. We were fortunate enough to have Henrik Urdal come visit us as a short-term scholar recently. Henrik is a senior researcher at the International Peace Research Institute in Oslo, Norway. Henrik's an expert on understanding demographic issues in the context of conflict and security linkages. Henrik, you've been focusing on demography and conflict and security issues for a number of years. And you and your colleagues at PRIO in Oslo have really been at the forefront of trying to understand these linkages. If you're introducing a policy audience to this set of questions in terms of conflict and demography, what do you start with? What are the essentials that they need to understand when trying to wrap their arms around demography and conflict linkages?
I mean, some of the demographic trends that we see aren't something that we can change in a short time horizon. Obviously, states have some leverage over demographic developments, but in the short run, many demographic trends is something we have to take as a given, and how states respond to those trends is crucial for whether they are able to grab opportunities and whether they're rather facing challenges and potential instability.
Often we hear this phrase that demography is destiny. So is that something you subscribe to? And then to give it, in some ways, to challenge that notion, can you talk about the example of Iran and the seemingly very rapid changes in fertility patterns in that country?
No, I think it's very clear that demography is not destiny. It's it represents some challenges, and demography can be a very substantial challenge, and particularly to many relatively weak states with weak and underdeveloped institutions. Clearly, we shouldn't. We should recognize that demography sometimes represent challenges that many governments are not able to face. They simply don't have the capacity to face the challenges at hand. When it comes to Iran, I think Iran is an excellent example. They put in place a very ambitious family planning program, and in over a decade, they managed to go from fertility of more than 5 children per woman down to just above 2, and it's pretty much unprecedented in the world. And Iran is now certainly looking at potential for demographic bonus, and I think that was something that the Iranian government was aware of and has been trying to achieve, and I'm pretty confident that Iran is going to at least be in a good position to make use of their demographic window of opportunity.
We hear a lot of talk now about the importance of urbanization as the world either has or is soon to go from over 50% rural to 50% urban. What does your analysis tell you about links between urbanization and conflict? Is it on the main a force for, do you see correlations with higher levels of conflict based on urbanization, or is it something where there are lower levels, or it's too hard to tell, or remains to be seen?
Well, we should keep in mind when we think about urbanization that I would say for most people who move from rural to urban areas, it represents an increase in their life prospects. I mean, it does represent access to healthcare, access to education, generally higher standard of life. There are many urban areas that have huge problems also, and it has been speculated about the relationship. What I can say from general studies of conflict and urbanization is that there doesn't seem to be a relationship between the pace of the urban growth and armed conflict, but I don't say that it can never be a relationship, and I think quite possibly we need to look more into this, perhaps from the city perspective, and look at cities more specifically to see what are the factors that sometimes can lead to higher levels of urban violence.
Can you say a little bit about your new research on India? I know in one of the many challenges that those of you who are doing so much work with quantitative methods, the challenge you have of not having good data at levels below the state. But India is an exception to that because there's an awful lot of data. So what are you finding in terms of your kind of various questions about demography and security, demography and conflict in India?
Yeah, India is a very interesting example, both because there are generally very good records for a lot of different types of data, both economic, demographic, social, and also political violence. India is incredibly diverse with regard to these factors as well, including political violence. And so there is, India is a country where you have a lot of variation in terms of political violence. What I've found in my studies that it did surprise me to some extent, that I do find stronger support for the resource scarcity perspective generally. There seems to be something to some of the variables measuring scarcity of land and to some extent to inequality factors locally. I also find that, which also surprised me, that age structure also matters when you look internally in countries, and that for all the measures I use for political violence, a younger age structure is associated with a slightly higher risk of conflict.
This has been a podcast from the Environmental Change and Security Program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. If you would like to know more about the linkages between population, health, and environment, visit us on the web at www.wilsonCenter.org/ECSP or at our blog at newsecuritybeat.blogspot.com.